one of our very own, Mr. Achin Khanna, Managing Partner, Strategic Advisory, Hotelivate, taking us through the 25th edition of the Indian Hospitality Trends and Opportunities Report. Mr. Khanna is a member of the Royal Institution of the Chartered Surveyors and has gained valuable experience across professional roles, ranging from hotel operations and revenue management to franchise relations and business development. He has now served 16 years in the hospitality consulting. Ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to HOSI. And I think the one report I would hope most of you are very familiar with. We just came out with the latest edition about a week ago, and I am hoping some of you have had the opportunity to glance through it, go through the pages. I'm going to do a quick run through of some of the key highlights. In many speeches like this that I've given over the years when we present at our conferences, I've always repeatedly stated that, yes, we're a data-driven organization, we're a data-driven industry today, and data and numbers and analytics are stuff that all you and I, as leaders in the industry, use to make decisions. But what I always find joy in, and I've said this repeatedly, is really the story that these numbers are telling, and not just the numbers in themselves, right? And I thought maybe we could share some of that with you today and see what some of the stories we're seeing from the last fiscal, and hopefully where we're headed. So with that, I'm sorry, I'm going to request most of you to keep looking at your right so that you have a quick snapshot of what I'm talking about. We've had our largest ever participation in T&O this year with over 150,000 rooms. So we crossed the 1.5 lakh mark for the first time from a branded and organized supply standpoint. 1,300 plus hotels, 53 hotel companies, 174 brands. Sometimes people don't realize how many hotel brands operate just in India. And in case you weren't aware, it's 174 at least. And between cities, towns, villages, 238 big and small that we covered and tracked. 32 states and UTs, as you know. Gonna find it difficult to use the mouse. There you go. I'm not going to read every word, but just a few highlights. As you know, last fiscal we came back up from our 32, 33, 34% nationwide occupancy during the pandemic. We just crossed 50% occupancy in fiscal 22 at a nationwide blended level. ADRs were just shy of 5,000 rupees, 4,900 odd. And this is again nationwide blended, as I said. And this is just the big picture. There was about a 50% in percentage terms recovery on year RevPAR. And we're all very familiar with the correlation, I would imagine, between hospitality, room night demand, and obviously aviation and people coming into your cities and towns. Big numbers, this was about 250 million all travelers in FY20 just before the pandemic hit, which crashed down to 76, 77 million because of the lockdowns and so forth during the first year of COVID. We've jumped back up to almost half of pre-COVID. So while, one of the things I want you to think about, hotels have gone from 66, 67% occupancy to 33%, back up to 50, 51%. Very similar trend line in aviation. 250 down to 79, back up to 130. So in ratio terms, in proportion terms, in percentile terms, you'll see that the growth has been very similar. The number of people traveling by air has grown in the same proportion as the number of people consuming room nights on a nationwide blended basis. And it's no surprise that that should happen, right? This is just a quick snapshot data that you're all already familiar with. We've been tracking this since 1996, 97. And what I like to see in this is not the individual years itself, but rather this. Right? And we all keep talking about cyclicity, but when you see things over a 25-year period, it becomes so much more evident. You can see the wave. You can see the cyclical nature of the industry if you were to just look at this over a certain period of time. And it is traditionally a 3 to 4 to 5 year cycle, both up and down. And yes, COVID aside, we were in an upcycle that then suddenly crashed and we're coming back up. But you can see how that moved from a available room night and occupied room night standpoint over the last 25 years. Like I said, 50% last fiscal. The same thing when seen in average rate, RevPAR and occupancy, right? So ADRs were not displayed in the previous one, but if you look at how the ADR curve has moved, we all remember the 2006, 7, 8 days, and we all saw the uptick from 2015 to 2018, 19, and then the crash, of course. But I think things are recovering rather quickly. And I'll talk, like I said, briefly about how we are doing in FY23, which all of you, I'm sure, are equally familiar with. So we looked at a few different things in the TNO this year for the very first time. We decided to slice and dice this data. It's only 3 data points if you think about it, right? Occupancy, average rate, and RevPAR for every single branded and organized hotel in the country. FY19, you see, 60% of our rooms were between the 60 to 80% occupancy. And that in FY21, if you were to look at the same 60 to 80% bucket, actually that's only 3.5% of the rooms, because obviously the pandemic killed that all. And you see everything, pretty much 70% of the hotels in India averaged between 20 to 40% occupancy that year, which is why the nationwide number was 33 point some percent. As we look at this most recent fiscal, you'll see that we're halfway there. About 60-65% of the occupancies of the hotels were between 40 and 70%. There were some rooms that got sold north of 70, but I think when you look at the fiscal we're in today, this number is already looking much brighter. Same thing for average rates. If you were to look at these bins, you'll notice that not a lot of our hotels do very well from an ADR standpoint. When you start looking at nationwide blended numbers, a bulk of our rooms sit in the 2,500 to 5,000 space. In FY19, in FY21, in FY22, that's not changing much. What's unfortunate is that there used to be at least a certain audience in the 10,000 plus range. I've always stated this, and I remember giving a talk about 10 or 11 years ago when I said that only 2.5% of India's inventory charges more than $200 a night. Sadly, I must admit that number is now 3%, 11 years later, and that's it. And that's the only movement we've had from a high ADR standpoint. Granted, we have good quality leisure, luxury, experiential properties today in far better measure than we did maybe 10, 12 years ago. And both domestic and international brands are adding to that. But it's still, in the big scheme of things, it's a dismally small number. We're not a strong luxury and leisure market as we'd like to claim. Leisure's ticking, I admit it. Leisure's making us money, I agree. But let's not fool ourselves into believing that we've become a great leisure destination, certainly not from an inbound standpoint yet. Our domestic demographic has helped us, and good for us that we have that. But if we're trying to or aspiring to compete with global true leisure destinations, we're not close to that yet, and I think we must be willing to admit that. I'm going to skip some of these in the interest of time because I know we're short on it today, but this is again data that's available to you in the report. You know that the performance was largely one of recovery from an occupancy ADR and standpoint. This was another interesting thing we looked at differently today. So we divided all the inventory of India by admin zones. We said, let's look at north, south, east, west, and who performed how. So if you see, just let's look at occupancy by admin zone, right? West India, 70% occupancy versus South India, 63%. That was the variance in when it was 2018-19. But when you look at 21-22, West was still ruling it, South was still South, but you see the overall dip. Look at it in RevPAR terms. West used to be the highest RevPAR. North has been the highest RevPAR in most recent years. And I guess not surprising again, right? North India had a lot of leisure travel last fiscal, and that helped the cause. Similarly, if you look at it by city tiers, we took every one of those 238 cities and towns and divided it into tier 1, 2, and 3. And I had a few learnings here at least. I mean, if you look at occupancy, you will see that tier 1, 2, and 3 ADRs in 2018-19 were 68 for 5,047, and that's dropped to 5. In fact, that's not northwest south, that's tier 1, 2, 3 again. That's 5,044 and 51. Tier 3 actually had the highest ADRs in and it's because a lot of these getaway destinations, a lot of these smaller towns which have these larger, the newer luxury or experiential products are actually tier 3 towns or villages or cities or leisure getaway destinations, and that's what's allowed for that, right? This is a contentious slide that has had a lot of debate as early as yesterday. You know, there was an event yesterday where this was debated, discussed. I've seen some of this being printed in the media in the last week, 10 days, and being heavily debated. It's a fact though, and it's our job to state the facts. Yes, all hotels declined in FY20, I mean FY21. And yes, all hotels have come back in some measure. But when I slice and dice this by hotels that have an international brand versus hotels that have an India-originated brand, so the Taj Group, ITC, Leela, Lemon Tree, Sarovar, so on and so forth, hotel companies that have originated in India versus the ones that come from abroad and now have a strong presence in India, the growth has been double when it comes to recovery for the India origin brands as compared to the international ones. And there's good reason. I'm not saying international brands are doing poorly. Don't take my statements as a judgment call on one brand over the other. All I'm stating is that the data tells us that the Indian origin brands recovered faster. And it's probably because the Indian origin brands have a larger footprint in leisure markets. They have more of these palaces. They have more of these leisure getaway resorts. It is also probably because international brands are probably more, they have a larger percentage of their inventory in urban locations, which was a suffering year for them. And urban locations are doing well today. And to FY23 looks strong for Bangalore and Hyderabad and so forth. But it wasn't looking that strong last fiscal. And that blended number is a result here. Really quick, this is the supply story. As you are probably, if you've been reading the TN over the years, 10 years ago we were at 94,000 rooms, we're at 152,000 now, like I had said. This is how the pie splits. I want to quickly point out, this is not news to most of you, but as you know, 14.26% or the largest inventory share in the country right now is with Marriott International, followed by IHCL. About 30% is other companies beyond these top 10. And top 20 brands by total inventory. This is again, now we're looking at it from an inventory standpoint, Marriott being the largest, followed by IHCL again, as you know. But when you look at it by number of hotels, just as an FYI, again, not news to most of you, I would imagine. IHCL actually has more hotels than anybody else, followed secondly by Marriott and then ITC. Again, a couple of new things we did this year. We looked at the top 15 cities by average hotel size. So we simply took the branded and organized supply of a city and divided by that number of hotels to see what is the average size of a hotel. And Mumbai has the largest hotels in India with an average size of 224, followed by Delhi, Hyderabad, Greater Noida, Bangalore, and so forth. And again, if you look at the top 15 brands by average hotel size, not surprising to see Hotel Leela Ventures or HLV or the Leela Palaces Hotels and Resorts rather being the largest average sized hotels, because the singular brand of Leela and Leela Palaces are all upper upscale and luxury hotels with large footprints, right? So their average size would be the largest, followed by Hyatt, Lalit, Marriott, etc. Here's the top 15 brands by city presence. Again, IHCL present in more cities than anybody else, 77 I believe, followed by ITC, Radisson. Radisson, again, one of the better known brands from an expanse standpoint in more markets than most. Just a quick snapshot of the split of proposed supply. So while there's 153,000 rooms in India operating as of July this year, there's another 60-odd thousand in various stages of planning. I must highlight, like we always do, 72% of them are actively under development and will open in the next 60 months or less. Most of them, I would say, in the next 24 to 36 months. So here's the split on luxury, upscale and all, as has been expected for a while now. The bulk of the supply in the upper mid-scale and upscale space, with budget and luxury being on the two ends of the spectrum as the smallest growth trajectories. And that's just a big picture 5 years from now. If what we think is happening will happen, by FY27 you'll have almost 200,000 operating in India from a branded and organized standpoint. I'll make a quick comment before I speak of that. You know, it's our business to do analytics, right? And we look at both macro and micro. So I look at markets or micro markets or certain comp sets to see what's going to work, what's not. But even if I have to take a 30,000 feet view and say, what's the future looking like for India from a supply-demand dynamic standpoint? Simply speaking, we're going to add 35,000 rooms in the next 5 years. If I look at the active development ratio, 40,000 rooms on a base of 150,000. Over 5 years, that's 8,000 rooms a year, new supply on 150,000. So basic math tells me it's a 4.5% growth in supply year on year. So for the next 5 years, simplistically speaking, supply in India is going to grow by 4 to 5%. Now, all of you here know that demand is going to outpace that. COVID aside and unforeseen circumstances aside. So you have an upcycle in the offing. You have an opportunity to then push the ADR quotient. Somebody yesterday made a comment, I think it was Rajiv, he might be in the audience here from Fairmont, that everybody keeps looking at ADR and RevPAR. What about TrevPAR and what about GoPAR? And I say, I completely agree. We got to look at the full picture, but I think all things being equal, eventually we're looking at a situation where rooms are the primary driver. F&B is important, immensely important, and we must look at those metrics. But if I want to do an apples to apples without F&B influence or banqueting influence, I know demand supply is in favor of us doing well going forward as an industry. And just as I said quickly, here's the split by positioning, brand origin, tier city, administrative zone. Interesting to see that there's 63% of the proposed supply is international brands. And if you look at the north, that's getting most of that supply. I'm happy to share this, and you guys have access to the TNO if you want to study some of these later, of course. Occupancy by city, I think I'll skip talking about this. We have 2 or 3 minutes left, but you guys can study this when you get some time. You're aware of the major cities and how they're performing. By the way, what we've changed is, for the first time in 25 years of publishing this report, we've gone from 13 markets to 20. So we've started highlighting and displaying more markets, and we're providing that data for the last 20 years. So it's not just that we've added 20 markets from this year, we've actually gone back and given it to you for all the previous years as well. Quick final few slides. These were the top 15 markets by RevPAR, FY19 versus FY22. As you can see, Udaipur was number 1, and now Udaipur is number 2. Still a strong market, will remain a strong market. Rishikesh showed up on top. I had a debate yesterday with someone on why Rishikesh and how can you compare a market with 5 hotels with another market with 50 hotels. I'm not comparing. I'm simply telling you that with the minimum of 5 hotels, which was our threshold, if you don't have 5 hotels in a market, we did not count it. But as long as you have 5 hotels, you have a comp set. You're a valid market in my mind. And therefore, it qualifies Rishikesh. Obviously, we know why. They are good quality hotels. There's Taj, there's Ananda, there's a few others that have opened there, and the market's doing well. Let's acknowledge that, and that's all we've done. What I would like to highlight is that in the top 15 markets in FY22, no surprise, 13 of them were leisure. Delhi, Bombay being gateway cities, obviously being the 2 other performers. Bottom 15, not trying to make fun or disrespect the market, simply telling you the facts as they are. We're not surprised that the tier 2, tier 3 markets that were heavily reliant on either ITES demand or local trade and travel demand suffered as a result of COVID last fiscal. My last thoughts, like I said, my day job is to crunch numbers and to see where the trends are headed, right? And we've done that in good measure. We feel confident, and I don't do this often. I don't stick my neck out often to make a statement as bold as this, but I'm making one because I think I'll be proven right by the end of March 31st. We're going to see probably a 68% occupancy this fiscal at a nationwide blended level, something we haven't seen since the mid-2000s. Not the last upcycle, which was the last 4, 5, 6 years. We're talking about 68%, which was 2006, 2007 era. Maybe not the same ADRs for sure. I'm even saying we might touch 70% next year. So I hope I'm proven right for your sake and mine. And I hope you found some of this useful. Thank you.